Episode 3 of The Mandalorian is a weird one. The tonal shift between the first two episodes and episode 3 is quite extreme. This one is more consistent with something like Andor than what The Mandalorian has been showing, in that it is slow, it spends time world building, building out characters on a more nuanced level, all whilst foreshadowing important elements that are no doubt going to come back. But to go from the first two episodes to this is quite a shift. And I would be a hypocrite if I said I didn't like this one, because I thought Andor was masterful, and this being tonally similar to it, well, I can't complain. I just wish they had done it with The Mandalorian as a character, and not somebody else. There are going to be spoilers ahead, so you have been warned. So episode 3 starts off with Bo-Katan seemingly wanting to hide the fact that she has seen a mythosaur. And this makes total sense. She wants to be the ruler and the leader of Mandalore, and with the prophecies surrounding mythosaurs, it's totally understandable that this is one thing she doesn't want to share, especially with Din. And, you know, I kinda like the concept of them foreshadowing this kind of rivalry between the two on a more nuanced level, while also having their relationship grow at the same time. I think this will make for more drama, and I think as the story slowly progresses, the ultimate breakdown of their relationship is going to be an interesting plot point that I think they can do a lot with. We then move on to what I thought was an exceptional chase sequence. A number of Imperial TIE interceptors had discovered where Bo lived, and given the situation that they were all stuck inside of her Gauntlet starfighter, they kind of had to fight back. And I thought this entire dogfight/chase sequence was well shot, it was visually very good, it was fun to watch. However, my only real criticism of the sequence is that at times, the starfighters felt a little bit slow, but that didn't detract overall from my entertainment of it. I thought the way they handled the TIE interceptors, the way they handled the Gauntlet, the way they handled the N1, they all felt unique in how they approached the fight. It was visually very good, it sounded very good, it was shot very well, and that's actually a general theme throughout this whole episode. The way this episode was shot was actually pretty good. It felt bigger, it felt like it added scale to Star Wars, and we will get to that more later. Bo's castle then gets bombed, which I thought was an interesting parallel with the Empire bombing her home, and you can see this sparks some fire inside of her, and she chases these bombers, but it turns out there's an entire fleet of TIE fighters behind the bombers, so they're basically forced to flee. And I really did think this opening was very, very good. It's the best opening act to an episode as of yet this season, but then the episode does something entirely different. We have this action-packed, strong opening, and then we instantly get a wide sprawling shot of Coruscant, which I absolutely adored, but much to my surprise. We then see the Opera House from the prequels, and it was a strange visual shift between what we've been used to with The Mandalorian so far, and what this episode has presented. It was colourful, it's full of vibrancy, it's full of life, and ironically I was complaining about the fact that The Mandalorian and the volume itself tends to make Star Wars feel small in the way that it is shot by constantly having these awkward close-ups to fit the volume technology. And yet, almost every shot, almost everything on Coruscant felt big, it felt sprawling, it felt more like Star Wars. And then we go into the Opera House, and Dr. Pershing, the dude that kind of popped up in Season 1 and 2, the man that was doing the cloning for the Empire and needed Grogu, has been put into some kind of amnesty program for the New Republic. He's giving a speech in defense of the amnesty program, and then he explains why he went into cloning and why he did some terrible things, and I thought there was some exceptional dialogue in this episode, some exceptional writing. Again, a big shift tonally to The Mandalorian, which I think has been kind of cheesy and kind of bare bones when it comes to the writing and the dialogue. And we then follow Dr. Pershing for pretty much the whole episode. He returns back to his accommodation where other former Imperials are part of the amnesty program, and he meets the girl from Season 2, the communications officer on Moff Gideon's ship, and instantly you know something isn't quite right here. She's being all kind, she's being extremely sweet, and this didn't really line up to the character we saw last season. But what this episode does extremely well, and it's what Andor did very well too, was it adds layers to the world of Star Wars that we haven't really seen, and they give us a glimpse into how the New Republic operates and how they treat people. The way the initial parts of this episode are shot are supposed to be pretty. They're supposed to look good. They're supposed to give you this impression that the world is now a better place. But it is the subtlety of the writing that breaks through the kind of facade of this cleaner visual world that makes you realize the New Republic being entirely good is a bit of a facade. And I also really enjoyed some of the lore they were introducing to Coruscant as a planet too. They were walking through this kind of carnival thing, Pershing and the girl, and they come across this giant rock, and apparently it's the last remaining peak of a mountain that existed on Coruscant before it ultimately became an ecumenopolis, and I thought that was just a nice little touch. And there was also this other bit of dialogue that may have gone over many people's heads, where the word Tong's Day was mentioned. If you aren't aware, the Tong were the original Mandalorians, and they were once the dominant species of Coruscant, alongside the Gel, who were ancient humanity. And I just really liked this little reference to the expanded universe. It's then shown that Pershing is working in some kind of data center, archiving stuff, and you can see he feels really out of place. They are throwing away a lot of the Empire's technology for no real reason, and he feels that's a waste because that technology could be used for a good purpose. He is an extremely experienced cloning engineer that's being made to kind of sort files and pretend all of this tech is a waste. And it's one thing that I found really fascinating with this episode was that the members of this amnesty program were all given numbers rather than names. Despite the fact that the amnesty program was there to give this vibe of them being rescued from their dark pasts, they were actually being treated like cattle, and I really enjoyed the subtlety of the way they were trying to expose this supposed dichotomy between the Empire and the Republic. But in doing so, they actually showcased the New Republic as being cruel in their own kind of way and very mechanical. And it's really something I didn't think they would touch upon in a Star Wars story like this. We all know how bad the Empire was, and I really did think they would try to showcase how good the New Republic are in comparison. But I really enjoyed the way they were subtly showing that despite all the glitz and the glam of Coruscant, the New Republic were also just as mechanical, and they treated people pretty poorly too. Now, Pershing and the girl interact many times throughout this episode, and it's rather evident that she is manipulating him in some way. He is very regretful of the things that he did for the Empire, but he's also very passionate about the work and the good that can come from cloning, despite the New Republic banning it. The girl recognizes this and subtly manipulates him with wordplay and plays on the fact that she can help him do good things for the New Republic, but to do that they might have to be willing to do things that will get them in trouble in regards to the amnesty program. And the core element of this episode was building that relationship between the two and watching her manipulate him slowly. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the dialogue was really quite hard-hitting. It was really quite thought-provoking at times, which is just really out of the ordinary for an episode of The Mandalorian. There were also several moments where Pershing in this episode has to talk to a droid who is like a therapy officer and is making sure that he doesn't feel any kind of resentment to the New Republic and that he's on track in his personal growth, in being a good person and moving past the Imperial indoctrination. And the first time this is shown, he's like, yeah, I'm doing really well, I love the New Republic. But as the episode progresses and he goes back, you can see the cracks are forming through the girl's manipulation and the realization that he wants to be doing what he originally wanted to be doing, and that is doing good, but through the use of cloning technology. Anyway, her manipulation does eventually work, and he ends up believing that his skills are being wasted, and so he agrees to go against the rules of his amnesty and go somewhere with the girl in which he can get the equipment to start up his cloning research in secret. Then we have a sequence where they are trying to basically evade Republic authority on a train, which I thought was very tense. It was fun to watch. And it turns out she was taking him to a shipyard where there was loads of decommissioned Star Destroyers. I absolutely adored the shot where they were looking over the shipyard at all of the Star Destroyers. I mentioned earlier that there were so many shots in this episode that made the world feel bigger. Star Wars to me has always had scale. It's always something that George Lucas got so right. He wanted his world to feel big. The way he utilised the camera, the way he utilised visuals and CGI, it was always quite sprawling, especially in the prequels when he had more resources to do so. And yeah, sure, there were a lot of close-ups and there were a lot of moments where you could see that the volume was being used, but they integrated that with a load of these wide-angled shots and a lot of visually busy backgrounds that made for a nice balance between the two that I think has been missing in the way that the volume is being used. Anyway, they get onto the Star Destroyer and the girl basically says that under the Empire, they walked past each other hundreds of times and they didn't even acknowledge each other. And since meeting each other in the amnesty program, they've only known each other as numbers. And so they basically reintroduce themselves with their actual names, building more of a bond that she is intently manipulating through trust. They continue to walk through the Star Destroyer and they get the equipment they need, and they talk some more, and there's a clear distinction between the two characters and the reasons why they made the decisions they did, which led to their current situations, which is something that Elia, which is her name, is uncomfortable with. But there's something in the Star Destroyer making loads of noises and they ultimately have to run out, but when they do get out, they are caught by a bunch of the New Republic security, and it turns out that Elia is indeed some kind of spy, because she just takes the equipment and walks off right in front of the security while Pershing is arrested. We then instantly cut to another shot where Dr. Pershing is in some kind of machine that's on his head, and I absolutely adored this entire segment of the episode because it really emphasized those ideas that I was talking about earlier, where there's supposed to be this massive dichotomy between the New Republic and the Empire. Empire bad, New Republic very good. But the way this episode works and the way some of the dialogue is presented, it kind of blurs that dichotomy a little. The guy that's running this machine is telling Pershing that it's going to make you feel better, it's going to take away the Empire's indoctrination and make you a good person. And Dr. Pershing is like, no, I know exactly what this is, the Empire used it was a mind flayer. It's designed to take away your memories and destroy you mentally. And it's in this very moment that you realise the way the New Republic utilise their words makes you feel safer, it makes you feel better. But the reality of it is still a system, there is still corruption, and there is still a lot of cruelty and a lot of darkness within it, despite the guise of it being the good system or the good government. And then there was this really on-the-nose joke that I absolutely loved, where Dr. Pershing shouts, "No, it's a trap," and the officer that was running the machine was a Mon Calamari like Akbar, and the camera just kind of pans to his face when he says it, and I just thought that was so cheesy, but I thought it was really funny and it made me crack up. The machine then is turned on to a really low power setting, and you can see that this thing is now really getting into his mind, but we can also see that Elia is in some kind of control room looking over him. Now, we don't really know what her relevance is going to be in the story. She's obviously got something to do with Moff Gideon, but she's basically being praised by some New Republic dude as a perfect example of someone who's gone through the amnesty program and has beaten the Empire's indoctrination. However, it's like they kind of missed the part where she was also found on the Star Destroyer stealing stuff, and it's a little confusing unless, of course, she's basically a double spy and she's trying to root out those within the amnesty program that are still trying to support the Empire, while also being bad and supporting the Empire at the same time. Who knows? But anyway, she asks if she can stay to watch the Mind Flayer help her friend, to which the guy agrees, but then she turns the machine all the way up, supposedly destroying Dr. Pershing's mind. We then instantly cut back to Bo-Katan and Din, and they've gone to the Mandalorians on the planet that was in the first episode, and he returns to the armourer. He shows her that he has the water in a vial as proof that he is bathed in the living waters. Now, initially, I thought to myself this was kind of stupid. You know, I was thinking, why doesn't he take a picture? Why doesn't he bring back proof of maybe the plaque that had the Mandalore stuff on it? Why didn't he take a selfie, you know? But no, he brings back a vial of water that he could have got from anywhere. But they do actually answer that as she pours it in something and it reacts chemically, proving that it was indeed the Mandalorian mind's water. She then redeems Din, and in the process, she also redeems Bo, which I thought was kind of funny because she went in the water to save Din. But my only issue with this element of the story is that I really wanted them to get away from this cult and this redemption. I was really hoping what they were going to do with this show was to showcase to Din that he didn't need any redemption and expose the Watcher's flawed ideology to him, but it seems like they're hammering down on this redemption arc, and it just feels to me like it's limiting Din's character. But you know, there's still 5 episodes to go, who knows, maybe this will change. All the Mandalorians in the cave then begin to welcome Bo and Din back into the clan. They're patting their shoulders and stuff, and Bo then just kind of stands there and looks to the camera, and we cut to black, and that's the end of the episode. And so yeah, this may be a cliche opinion because you might hear this on the internet everywhere, but this episode really did feel more like an episode of Andor in the way that it was presented. It was slower, it focused on some heavier hitting dialogue, it focused more on nuance and substance in the development of characters and the world itself, and it really did kind of come out of left field. And there is a little bit of frustration for me here because this was the longest episode of The Mandalorian we have had. This was the right length for a Star Wars TV show. This was around 52 minutes long, and it was dedicated to a character that wasn't Din Djarin, the Mandalorian. Now, I have online seen some people call this episode filler, and, you know, I get it, but this episode was really establishing that kind of villainous presence that's going to be more relevant as we move forward. It's probably going to have something to do with Thrawn that will ultimately lead into the Ahsoka show, but I really do like the fact that they are introducing this villainous entity with some overtone rather than it just being a direct thing. But at the same time, this episode isn't consistent with the overall tone of The Mandalorian as a show. And I think that disconnect might put off some viewers, but I enjoyed it personally. And I really do hope that episodes moving forward are more inspired by this one in the way that they deal with their dialogue, their writing, their characters, and the world of Star Wars itself. As always, if you enjoyed the review, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal. And if you want to see my review for next week's episode of The Mandalorian, perhaps consider subscribing to join the community. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you, always.